administrative breaches. That's all they are. They're kind of contractual wrongs. They're not crimes, but they're treated as crimes for many decades. And this is a long-standing custom. It comes from the desire of the police to manage the poor and the weak and the black. It comes from the police power against people that they don't like. Okay, it could be a union activist, it could be someone like me, but it's generally used on African Americans and poor people and strangers, aliens and strangers, people God would say in the scriptures you have to protect: widows and orphans, aliens and strangers. Those are categories of people the Word of God in the Old Testament especially repeatedly says you cannot abuse them. You cannot abuse them. Over and over again, the Israelites were warned against that in dread of God, right? You don't offend them, you don't harass them, you don't extort them. And that this is state extortion. Traffic stops are a kind of human trafficking, and the people that they traffic are those that need to be in the court, right? They need to get these people in the jail because money is to be made on the back end of every prisoner. Money is to be made at every turn. And so we stop this by telling the officer, that you're revoked, okay? And so you simply say, I'm traveling under the notice. Now what happens is he'll say he didn't know anything about it and he's going to arrest you. Okay, well, that he's going to arrest you anyway. So I would say use this material in your benefit. Now, one thing I do want to say real quick, Roland, I'm not an attorney. I don't give legal advice. I don't have a law business, law practice, but I do a lot of reading, and my reporting as a journalist is usually about law. It's about law and how people use the law incorrectly. And I've broken some major stories about it, including on the transportation issue. Back when I was a younger man in the early 2000s, I was involved in a lawsuit with the government, and I didn't have a social security number, and I demanded to have a driver's license. Well, I sued, and I didn't appeal a negative ruling in the Court of Appeals, but the General Assembly rewrote the law to account for my arguments, which were that people who don't have social security numbers because they're aliens or strangers or have a religious objection to the mark of the beast can get a driver's license without one. They just have to file an affidavit, and that came from my case. So I've been involved with these people before on the driver's license issue. But the traffic stop, I would say don't say anything. Once you start talking, if you answer any questions, you are shooting yourself in the foot. Do not talk to police. Do not answer questions. That's the main point, because you are under arrest. The moment the lights come on, you are under arrest under State versus Garcia and another case, State versus Raspberry. You're under arrest. So when you start flapping your gums, you're shooting yourself down. Do not answer questions. Do not give anything. If they take you to the jail, go ahead.
So is that why once they stop you, they kind of give you have the right to remain silent?
They never give you your Miranda right warning in a traffic encounter. Never. The Chattanooga Police Department policy book requires that the Miranda warning be given, but they don't do it because, you see, this enforcement is not really a criminal matter. And so they're treating it as administrative, and yet there are criminal penalties attached to it. Jail. You're in the cage 2X in the car and in downtown. They'd put you in the jail. It's administrative. It is pretendedly a crime. And this is how the Chattanooga Police Department has been doing it for these past 1,163 days, despite my notice. They don't care. It's going to take several lawsuits. It's going to take proper defense of a person accused. And what I'm looking for as the writer of this notice is to help that person who wants to use my notice for their own protection in criminal case, and then to sue for damages for abusive, kidnapping, harassment. These are oppressions. We have a very good oppression statute in Tennessee, and that can be evoked in a civil case, in my opinion.
Because see, we've been most of my listeners, they've been under the impression that, hey, I have to have a driver's license, or I have to participate in this system. And I gave some information maybe a few years ago on my Facebook page how you don't really need a driver's license. And I even went as far as you don't need a social security number, which you alluded to earlier.
No, well, okay, on the SSN, you do not have to have a social security number at all unless you want to have dealings with government and corporations. They will expect you to have one. If you want to live the life of a private person, you can do so without the number. You have to just defend yourself when you want, let's say, to open a bank account. I did open a bank account without one as a younger man. It was Pioneer Bank, which is now Regions, but I opened one. I had a bank account many years without a number. On the side of driving, they'll tell you have to driving. This is true. Okay, here's what they'll tell you. Okay. Driving is a privilege. You cannot drive without a driver's license. That's true. You can't operate a motor vehicle without a driver's license. That's true. Now, what I do is this. Okay, I have a driver's license that's valid. I need that for the following reason. If I, Roland, haul somebody or carry somebody for pay, let's say from Saudi Daisy to East Ridge, where I've got my radio station, and they're paying me to do it, I better have that license. I better have insurance, and I better have the car registered as a motor vehicle because I'm using the road for pay. So I say I'm commerce ready, but when I'm on my own, let's say going to church or doing shopping in Hickson, I'm traveling, okay? And so when I'm doing that, I'm under my notice. So if they stop me, I'm going to say, well, I may have a license, but I'm not using that right now. Do you have to take your tag off your car when you go to church and then put it back on when you haul people for hire as a courier or a pizza delivery person? Do you take the tag on and off? No, you wouldn't. So your car is commerce ready. Sometimes the car is used for commerce and it better be in order. But most of the time, you're just using the car for private pleasure, private purposes, the exercise of your rights, the pursuit of necessities. And so, in those instances, in my mind, I'm going to stick by my notice. I'm going to say, well, officer, I'm traveling under administrative notice. And I don't answer questions without my attorney being present. And if he's going to arrest me, well, guess what? There's a lawsuit coming for false arrest. And that's worth, $25,000, $40,000. But because of notice, it could be worth an additional $25,000 in damages because they did it intentionally and knowingly. One lawsuit like that from one good person, that will change the system. It's a bottom-up solution. The high court says we're not looking at this, so we need to have a local change in local policy.
So if you would feel free, or if you can, could you give the name of the notice?
Yes. Okay. The notice is called Transportation Administrative Notice. If you just Google that or DuckDuckGo that, it pops up very quickly. It's a 20-page legal analysis in two parts. One is about the way the law is structured, regulating transportation, and this is all federal. This is federal law here. Jeanette, could you please close my door? And so we have a problem there with federal laws being violated. And the second part deals with the rights you have in the law, the way the laws are written, the court cases that define what a privilege is. A privilege is upon something that is an occupation, calling, or trade. How is it that using your car for private persons, for private purposes is a privilege? How does that work? Well, it really can't. When you Roland, go from your job to home, and then you go to meet friends at the tavern, that is not a privileged activity. It's not a calling or occupation. The thing that's regulated is the for-profit capitalist use of the road for hire, private gain. That's what's regulated. And we need to call them to account, and we need to have defense of the victims of policing in court, in sessions courts where it happens. And then we need to have aggressive NAACP type lawsuits here in Chattanooga using my notice. It is gonna have an effect. I believe that I've changed the tectonic plates, the plates of the earth slightly by this notice. And that is, I've put all these cops on notice that if they do this, they're acting under their personal authority. They're not acting by law with lawful authority, but they're acting personally against your listener your viewer who's the victim tonight, right? And that's a peril that they're not really aware of. Though I talk about it a good deal, I think officers don't really believe it.
So when you talk about this to people, what is the response you normally get?
Well, the response I normally get isn't really about the legal system and how the law is structured. The answer almost always is, well, boy, David, you're saying that someone who's drunk driving can't be stopped under the traffic statute that you say is applicable only to truckers. What about the guy who leaves the tavern drunk? You're saying that the cops can't stop him because because he's not involved in transportation. He's in his private, his private Volvo, right? Going to the next bar. Well, that's a kind of a scary thought, and the limits implied, the limits that are in view in that question, I don't think are real ones. If the law were properly enforced upon trucking, you could stop speeders and people who are thought to be drunk, who get, when the cop gets a call about someone being seemingly drunk on the road. You have other processes that are civil in nature. That would be abatement and nuisance. You can stop someone under a nuisance, under the nuisance authority. And we all have arrest powers. Arrest powers that the cops have are simply the same ones you have, Roland, and I have. We all have the same power to arrest. And that's when we see a crime being committed, we can stop the crime from happening. We all have that power. It's a common law power. It's recognized in the Tennessee Code. And
so talk about, what does that look like? Because you said we have the same arrest power that the police have.
Well, I said they have the same arrest powers that we have. I mean, we have it first.
Okay.
Right? This is a delegated power that the city cops have to stop crimes, to rush at someone who's robbing a store, to chase down someone who's beating a woman on a jog. Those are common law powers that the police have. Their power in the charter is two things, and these will exclude, if you listen to them, they will exclude traffic stops almost entirely. One is ordinance enforcement in Chattanooga, and then the second one is keeping the peace. Jimmy Lee Moore in his car was not breaching the peace when he went in his car with a revoked license. He wasn't. And so those are the two powers that they have, and they do not have power to use Title 55 or the motor carrier law at another title called 65. They don't have that power. It's called poaching. Cops poach on jurisdiction that's held by the Department of Revenue, the Department of Safety. And they do it, sort of grandiosely, self-importantly. They do that. They think they're doing the good thing and the right thing, but it's mostly just abuse nowadays.
And what is the kickback? I know you get. I'm asking, what's the kickback from the cops? Because honestly, that's the majority. Like, I know around the holidays, they make a lot of their quota based on those type of traffic stops.
Well, they do, and there are quotas. Collegedale was noted as having a quota, and Collegedale Police Department is very, very bad for that. Also, I think Signal Mountain has a very aggressive enforcement policy on people who travel by car into that mountaintop town. And again, they're using traffic infractions to give pretended probable cause arrest authority to investigate the person, right? And if you're a minority up there in a white enclave, you're asking for trouble. Okay? You're asking for an unfortunate encounter, and it's a long custom there. So yes, it is. These are low-level probable causes. There are suspicions, and the courts have long eroded our power to be free from this kind of encounter, unwelcome searching inquiry as to who we are, where we're going, where we've come from, who's in the back seat, can I see your license? These are all illicit, and they are, in my mind, they're crimes. If the cops have been notified about the limits in the statute, they better not arrest people. They better be careful. They better be careful, because their own assets, their own estates, in my analysis, are vulnerable to a personal lawsuit from an aggrieved traveler pulled over and harassed or delayed or seized by this cop.
So also, let me ask you this, because you stated earlier that poor people and black people are kind of the target for those type of stops, right?
Well, they are, and one reason they are is because when you're a poor person, you tend not to think about things that are, you might say, mechanical. Like, when's the last time a poor person who checked the tag light? Right, the tag light is a light violation, as they're called in the Chattanoogan.com roundup of arrestees. That's a routine poor person pulled over for a tag light that's out. Poor people, they have so much stress in their life. We're living in a depression. The CV-19, the coronavirus 19 depression, just put tremendous pressure on everybody. Maintenance, care for cars, and people are just stressed out. They have broken homes. They have domestic problems. They have bills they can't pay. They have phone bills that are overdue, and they're under stress. There are a lot of poor people. The elite management of the paper money economy is a disaster for poor people, and the middle class is almost gone. We've got the very wealthy, and then a lot of hardworking common people, very poor. And the police are they're kind of strip mining that population for the valuable ore or oil, if you will, of those people. They need, which lubricate that machinery. It is a prison industrial complex. It is a business, a state-run business that uses black people. And Roland, my project is a kind of racial atonement. Okay, I'm a very rich man up here. My
Okay.
goal is to help you and your listeners take advantage of what I have found out. I mean, I have this material. I can help people get off from their criminal cases by just research I've done. I've published it. It's available. And what I do as a journalist is I like people calling me and telling me what their problems are. I really do. And I write about them. I write about the 911 call from hell. I write about the false arrest of Hanson Melvin. And there are many cases that I try to deal with, and I write about them, and people use my stuff. And that's my goal, is that they use my stuff. They have to understand some of the basics. And people who don't want to work for their own case, I really can't help them. But people who care, who want to use my material and want to talk to me about how to use it, I'm always glad to give personal opinion. I don't give legal advice, but I'm ready to help anybody, especially if we can get this notice to be adopted. My demand for Tim Kelly, the mayor, the new mayor in Chattanooga, is, Tim, do something bold and daring. Declare that you're going to obey Title 55 and Title 65 and no longer abuse the people in this city. Stop abusing them. Start over. Don't let Andy Burke's mistake in rejecting this notice influence you. Use this notice to reform the whole thing, top to bottom. He's on the right track. He wants to end economic crimes of the kind we've mentioned, Roland.
Okay. But again, like what's the response from the like,
The
do you,
police?
yeah, to you,
Well,
to the ordinance?
Well, I don't deal with police very much, and I've talked with David Roddy. I've told him I'm not the enemy. I don't need to talk to police, and so I just don't really have encounters with them. My thinking is they tune into my show because I talk about police a lot, so they want to know what I have to offer. I think they disagree with most of it. They've been trained to disagree with it. They've been trained to not see how the law works. They do not understand constitutional rights.
Hold on. So you saying the law enforcement officers don't even understand constitutional rights?
No, they don't. They're not. They don't study it in school, and when they go to to become candidates for cadet, they're not trained there either. They're trained to run procedure. They're trained in what are called customs and usages, how we've always done things. So traffic stops have decades of custom and usage, from the old cops to the new ones. Everybody does it the same way. We don't worry about the distinction between travel and driving that you raised at the beginning of our conversation. They don't care about that. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, Roland, because of the fiction that says all travel is commercial. That it's a legal fiction. It is a fraud and a lie, and the cops are taught only the lies. They're not taught about respecting the right of movement the right of communication. Think about, you could have no rights, Roland, if you couldn't go somewhere freely. You had no right would be operable if every time to exercise that right, you had to get permission to go from point A to point B. Cops don't get the Constitution, but I think a lot of cops know that they're in a bad place. I think a lot of them, because I've been on the air for 7 years, know and talking about these kinds of things. They know that their employer has left them out exposed to legal hazard by those people, like maybe your listeners and viewers, who are offended, who want to maybe file a lawsuit, or who have a defense in court to get the case dismissed.
And a lot of people, man, like just in talking to people who listen to the show, and also just talking to people in general, when I've told them about, and I've even sent people videos about how you don't have to have a license to travel, they pretty much look at you like a deer in the headlights.
Well, that's right. They say, here's the smear that comes against people like me, and it's a smear and a slander. They say you're a sovereign individual. You're a sovereign citizen. Now, what they're referring to are kind of cranky people who are Constitution minded, who they say believe that no law applies to them. Well, the problem really, Roland, isn't private people in their cars who are cranky constitutionalists. The problem with sovereign citizens and sovereign individuals is that they're all in place of power. They're all in elected positions, or they're on payrolls. Remember, Chattanooga police are gunmen on the city payroll. Gunmen on the city payroll. That's what they are. And they think that somehow they're above the law. The law doesn't apply to them. Title 55, it makes distinctions I don't have to worry about, because I do what we've always done here in Chattanooga. And so the sovereign individual problem is not on the part of cranky people who make YouTube videos, or people like you and me. The problem is in the payroll of government, up to the governor, whom I'm suing for being a sovereign individual on the coronavirus 19 scam, down to the local cop. They're all somehow exempt. Look at it this way. You have to obey laws that don't apply to you, Roland, right? You obey laws that apply to you, and they don't have to obey laws that do apply to them. They don't have to obey them. So Title 55 may apply to some police activity, but a very little bit. As I suggested earlier, troopers have real authority. Troopers are the enforcement arm of the Department of Safety. They enforce the taxes, the regulation of the cars. But again, it's only on people who are driving and transporting. They have no authority over private parties, but they're troopers trained to not see any private party. Everybody they see on the road is involved in transportation, and that's just the way they're trained. And it's a big problem. So we can't bring top-down reform in this matter at all. Jim Crow will end by bottom-up reform by people like you and your viewer thinking, well, I can do something on my own. I can stand my ground. I can have a reasonable, lawful defense of my activities. And if I'm charged, I have a defense. It's a bottom-up reform, not a top-down fix. It cannot be fixed top-down. It will not be fixed. It won't be.
So basically, we have to, like you doing with your ordinance, you serve notice. And once you serve notice, then it has to be a continual thing, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Right. Once notice, there's a whole body of law on the doctrine of notice. Once a party has been notified of something, they are put on awares, as the law says. When you get a notice from the IRS, you better believe that you better respond to it. You have to account for it. Notice is always important. And in this case, my transportation administrative notice put them on awares of the disabilities in the law, not say the limits in the law and the limits in their power. And when they go against the notice, they're effectively going against the law. And they're doing it intentionally and knowingly with malice. So what you're bringing in, what you're showing is malice. The law is clear. They don't have these powers to stop people arbitrarily. They can't arrest them. They can't arrest them on the spot. And if anything, these are administrative charges, and there are multiple defenses that people have not